Contraband was first announced during the Xbox showcase at E3 2021 and was described as a co-op smuggler's paradise, taking place during the 70s in Bayan, a fictional Southeast Asian island. According to the director, the game was going to take everything Avalanche Studios has learned from the past 18 years of open-world game development. After struggling with failed games since 2019 and eventually closing 3 offices, Contraband could have been the game to get Avalanche out of the ditch they have fallen into. With rumored features like a focus on vehicle combat, online multiplayer, and now with the Just Cause series being left to die, unlike what they put out the past 2 years, this game sounded like what people expect from an Avalanche Studios game. After the reveal, however, we would never hear from the game again, apart from insiders claiming it's still being worked on. Only more than 4 years later, in August 2025, would we learn the game was cancelled by Microsoft, several weeks after axing numerous other projects. This not only marked the end of the partnership between the two companies, but also the end of Avalanche's most ambitious and interesting game. It's now been a year since Avalanche Studios announced the game's cancellation, and now I'll give you a look at some of the things that could have been. We here on the channel know them for the Just Cause games, but that's not what's keeping the lights on now. In 2017, Avalanche released The Hunter Call of the Wild, a paid live service hunting game where every content drop is a paid DLC. Initially, the game wasn't very popular, but over the time it gained a huge player base. Today it's their most played game, with usually between 4,000 and 7,000 people playing at any time. That number can easily jump to 15,000 when a new map drops. In 2022, they tried to reproduce the success with Call of the Wild: The Angler, a fishing game that was looking to do the exact same thing Hunter did. That game, however, fell off after not even 2 months, never getting more than 300 players at a time again after release. The game got discontinued not even 3 years after release in early 2025. The game may have failed, but to us who are excited for Contraband, it was a gift in disguise. Avalanche left several beta versions of this game public on Steam, and the earliest one contains this. The entire test world for Contraband. And while this is not the main map of the game, it does contain early blockouts, tons of props, vehicles, and environment concepts. Now, it is important to note that this map is from February 18th, 2022, over 4 years before the game was cancelled. So while this content does resemble Contraband at some point in development, it may not resemble the original vision or the version of the game that was cancelled. An interesting coincidence is that this build was created the same day as the first gameplay details were published, and only 6 days before the first insider infos by Jess Corden, giving us the perfect chance to see those claims verified. And before anyone calls this a fake, download it yourself. This is the depot on Steam, accessible by anyone who owns a copy of Call of the Wild: The Angler. With all of that now out of the way, let's finally jump in. Booting up the game starts off very inconspicuous. We can hit enter on the title screen and start the game. We then get dropped off in the Angler beta map, which seems to be the default map, Golden Ridge Reserve. We can see some resemblances to the final version, even though it is laid out entirely differently. The UI also still has hints of Rage 2, but we're not here for any of this. To get to the good stuff, we open the developer menu with F9, then navigate to Test, Run Test, Test on Foot. We get dropped into an entirely different map, and this is where the fun begins. Stepping up to this cliffside, we can see that pretty much the entire western half of this map is dominated by this big mountain range. But we can also see the first 2 test locations. One is just a super simple test track. The second one is an on-foot test location labeled as Jungle Hideout 2. It's got what seems to be a small port that's leading up to a central building. Walking in there lets you fall down to a basement area that goes on the circle, but you can't seem to be able to leave again without free cam. Around it we also have more stairs, a surrounding wall, ruins, spires from what I assume is supposed to be a sunken temple, and the side area with a ramp at the end. As you can see here, and more often later on, there are a lot of locations that are either located at a lake, which seems to resemble the ocean instead, or a port. This clearly showcases the game's island setting, Even if it wasn't meant to be an island at first, the setting was probably still not really a full country, but rather a coastline. In the distance, we can see something much more intricate, so let's move on to that. This place is called Test On-Ground Strike Area. We have this big center temple, with more spires around. One side has houses, and the other storage buildings, and what looks to be a parking space before the entrance to the area. You can once again enter the main structure, but nothing here has collision. But we can see there are 4 entrances that ultimately lead into a wall. We can also see our first vehicles here, some wooden boats and cars resembling an old Alfa Romeo. Vehicles in this game generally consist of Soviet, Italian and Japanese imports, plus a handful of American and a French helicopter, but we will get to those later. You've probably also seen this floating platform up there. It's simply called Good Sizes. It spawns these 2 vehicles and has a bunch of boxes in this building over here. Walking up to one prompts you to pick it up, but it doesn't seem to work in this game. If it did work, you're probably supposed to toss them onto the truck and drive them over to the other building and unload them. The vehicles can be driven, and let's switch to third person for this, which gives you a much better look at what driving them was going to be like in Contraband. This area seems to showcase one of the game's central gameplay mechanics. Insider reports say that a major gameplay mechanic were smuggling runs, which this here seems to resemble the start and end of. The other vehicle is likely supposed to be the chase car used by the opposite faction. Another interesting detail stated in the report is that using weapons was considered the final option, since it could damage the cargo or even blow up the entire vehicle. Instead, enemies would attempt to push you off the road or even set up roadblocks. The game was also reported to be vehicle first, and your own vehicle was reported by insiders to be your most important tool, even being compared to Tony Stark's Iron Man suit. This sounds oddly similar to the magnum opus from Avalanche's Mad Max game. I would even go as far as to speculate that vehicle customization was supposed to be a big thing. It was somewhat alluded to in the teaser trailer. At the end we can see someone welding to a car's undercarriage. We can also see an engine on a crane. This would make it less disposable than vehicles in Just Cause, where you usually just jump out and wingsuit away, and instead gives you a reason to take care of it. One more area in this corner of the map is the character art test, showcasing some early character, weapon and item designs. We can see some more unique looking characters, and some that were probably used as bases for NPCs. There's also this bag that was definitely used to hide of course, jeans. Yes, definitely. 2 of these guys over here actually look familiar, but we will get to that later on when we look at the game's hero art. Along the eastern side of the map, we have the small place called Mad End Test. A floating town with what seems like mostly warehouses and garages, but we can also see some bridge parts that can be walked on. I can only speculate here, but since we do have a boat, I could imagine the player was supposed to raid a place like this by boat in the finished game. The insider report claimed Contraband's gameplay is mixing Sea of Thieves elements with Avalanche sandbox chaos, which could be referring to an area like this. The bridges between sections could also possibly serve as choke points and build up to a new wave of enemies. Next to this we also have a waterfall that has this really strange light effect. It can blind out the entire screen to white if you get too close. The light can also look strange thanks to it. It's called Light Probe Test and strangely only adds like this sometimes. Now for the big one though, the town. There is no name mentioned sadly, it's simply called Tech Dev Bar. But we can see a lot here. The main street enters in front and goes by residential buildings. These might be one of the most finished assets in this build. You can even see the wear on the facades. Each one has different small alleyways in between. Windows with towels hanging from them, differently colored curtains behind them, some are open, some are closed, and some boarded up behind. Almost every door has these differently colored metal bars in front, and attached to it are several letterboxes. Another small detail is this unique box that is just labeled Box. You can walk up to it, and a small animation plays that opens the lid. The main area here is surrounded by these textureless mannequins that reset every so often. They look rather uncanny, with the crude walk cycle and expressionless face, but what do we expect from a test world? There is a small market area with fruits, vegetables and rice being sold. And once again, these assets are really finished looking. They are not just throwaway assets. In the very back facing off the cliff, we also have the store labeled as Misc's shop. Little fun fact, the music track you heard in the intro is actually from this build itself. There are 4 other tracks, but they are all licensed songs. 2 of them are Cambodian songs that I won't even attempt to pronounce, because I know I'll butcher their names. The other 2 are Rock'n'Roll Is Dead by the Ruby News and City Slang by Sonic's Rendezvous. But possibly the coolest thing in this area is the bar. Hidden in the less finished building in the back, the entrance is blocked by a stool, but you can get in easily. And again, this is such a detailed area. The tile floor, the animated neon sign, the beer dispensers with actual names on them, a back room where I'd assume the shady deals happen, and this bathroom area. But the interesting thing about this is what's below. It's an entire basement with a couch, a projector, these statues, wooden crates, a fuse box looking thing on the wall, intricate pipework, and even a window to look up to on the roads above. There is no way to get here though without freecam, but the door implies it would be connected to the above somehow, possibly with the door in the bathroom area. This may be a bit of a reach, but towards the end of 2025, a leak surfaced showcasing what seems to be mock-up UI concepts from Contraband. In the player list screenshot in particular, we can see a basement-looking area in the background, which could be what this basement is supposed to be a concept of. The couch and projector in particular make me think this was supposed to be for a heist setup cutscene, kind of how some GTA missions do it. The Typhoon neon sign also seems to corroborate the art direction of neon signs seen in the downtown map preview. But this is all just speculating, and these images are likely just concepts, which is further indicated by the fact that these character designs are not Avalanche's own, but were taken from a Marvel artist's Twitter post and just used as placeholders here. Following the main road further, we can see this wooden warehouse, with another one further out on the edge of this platform. The rest of the town is smaller, untextured buildings. Also, yet another temple. But we have seen this one before. But what's special about it is that this one is labeled as a mission location and called Winter's Palace. Who that is? No idea, unfortunately. The last interesting thing in this town are 2 police officers sitting in 2 police cars over here, and the NPCs getting more and more confused as time goes on. Just outside the city are more mission locations. This group of small buildings with trash littered around is labeled as Serpent Cafe. Not much to see here sadly, so you can't know what this was going to be for. Further back we can see a crude blockout of a sailboat labeled as Lorenzo's Yacht. Once again, there is not much to see, but it's safe to assume Lorenzo would have been a key character. The last mission location is this hangar with some wrecked vehicles in front. It has a small room in the back with mannequins inside and a button you can press. The screen briefly fades to black, but nothing changes. And the button prompt conveniently has no text assigned, so it just says no lock. This map quietly contains some named story contacts, but apart from those, mission information is scarce and almost non-existent. The only other details we have here is that the single-player campaign was about a corrupt dynasty called the Wong. The teaser trailer also has an operation named the Sun River Job. Further out, we can see another hangar. This one is labeled as Vehicle Strike Testbed Destination, but there's nothing going on. Next to it is a helicopter and a boat we can actually use. The helicopter honestly feels okay to fly, but the boat is incredibly slow and doesn't feel good to steer. Apart from those 2, there is also this small car you can see driving everywhere. It comes in multiple configurations like a pickup, wagon, convertible and sedan, and they all feel very nice to drive, just again, very slow. A more unique vehicle is a muscle car that mostly resembles the 70s Dodge Charger. This one can actually get some speed, but it understeers really badly and loses traction easily. The final car is the medium pickup, a square body style truck with massive lift. This one unfortunately can't be driven as it just crashes the game. And lastly, a blue bike that's funnily enough the fastest vehicle. Its physics are really weird, and it's like you get pushed around when steering, so it's not too usable. Alright, so this is editing Luke here, and I did not think to try this earlier, but I deem it significant enough to interrupt the video here briefly. And I never tested if vehicles can actually be destroyed. But while I was editing, it turns out yes, they can. So let's just drive this off the mountain like any normal person would do in Just Cause 3 and see what happens. The game locks up with yet another error message, of course. But also, the car just has destruction and detachable parts, and you die. I didn't think I could die in this game, but you just get kicked back to the title screen, and then it gets stuck here. You can get back out just by like running the test again, but just wanted to throw that in. Let's continue. Over here we have a showcase of materials and shaders, along with this really funny spinning missing shader features pop-up that looks way too nice for what it's worth. The fur and velvet showcases actually work and they look rather impressive. The materials also. We can see various fabric, curtains / tablecloths, stones, bricks and woods. And then this transparent one. These small rooms next to the heli have various material showcase balls inside, nothing too interesting. And then this room has the key art inside of it, but I'll get to that at the end to recap everything. There is also this small stone box that has a room inside that looks like a small storage room. Maybe something that's actually at Avalanche HQ. Next up we have several galleries showcasing all the assets that already exist, starting off uneventful with untextured trees and the very shiny character heads. So let's move on to small and medium props and decoration. About half of them are already textured. What sticks out immediately is this huge intricate cabinet with lots of paper and other things on it, including what looks like a bunch of small storage devices. They're not cassettes, but they also don't quite look like hard drives, which wouldn't really fit with the 70s theme either. So if anyone has an idea what those could be, let me know. There's also this TV playing a loop of a British news station as seen by the weather map, but also soccer, what looks like a demonstration or a concert, and a view on a street with barbed wire on the front and the left. Then there's also different types of fans, most of them are animated and some are even textured. Another prop that sticks out is this wall of electrical wiring that looks like it has electrical meters or fuses. There is an assortment of lamps, with some standard ones up front, but then these traditional Asian looking lamps that are again insanely detailed, with even individual threads hanging from the bottom and stains showing up on the main body. We also have the bazaar stands we saw in the town earlier. Let me also give you a closer look at these fruit baskets. Only a handful of the fruit are actually real. The bottom is a flat texture, which looks really bad in comparison to the rest of the object. I wonder if they really had no better way to get this done. In the back we also have a ton of pipe models that could probably be assembled in any way a designer could ever dream of. And finally, we have another glowing typhoon sign. Once we get to the main structure gallery, we can see the section with the nice buildings is labeled as Scoreggia Nox. I first assumed this was a name for the real place these assets would be used, until I found out that Scoreggia just means part in Italian, so this might have just been a joke among the developers. It's got these small roofs and awnings, and then the single most detailed asset I have found. This big row of house elements with incredibly intricate facade wear and different murals engraved onto the front. Also interesting to note is that none of the windows can be looked into. They all have these sunshades on them, and the bottom ones simply aren't see-through. We will get to why this could be relevant later on. Apart from this house area, we also have another bar. Though interestingly, this is not the same one we saw in the town. This one doesn't have the back room, and also not the toilet area. Instead it has even more seating, and this different back room at the end with the fuse box asset. There is also a ladder that would go to the area above the barkeeper, but it's boarded up and no clipping through doesn't really show anything apart from an empty room. The other detailed assets here are another Smith's bar and the basement that was in the town below its bar. The untextured assets are nothing special we haven't seen before, apart from these interior room looking presets. They are just big room sized boxes, some of them have doorways, and there's also this single set of stairs. The last on-ground area is the small set of assets a bit further out labeled as Sequence Test. We can't trigger anything though, but we have what I assume are explosive barrels, next to a stool, behind a door, and next to this wall and a building. While we're in this corner of the map, let's also take a look over here. It's an entrance to a cave system. It starts narrow and leads into this room with these random stone formations and this side tunnel. Further back it opens up to several larger rooms that increase in size. I can't imagine this is supposed to resemble anything, as it seems to just be sculpted random things out of the terrain, but it does show off what Avalanche's terrain tech can do quite nicely. Having caves at all could indicate them being used as a hideout for a heist perhaps, which would be a nice touch. There is also another cave near the starting area, with this one being more vertical, but also smaller, and also even more random looking than the last one. A third cave can be found on the other side, but it's the smallest one of the bunch. We're not done yet though. We did miss some floating platforms above the town and gallery area. One we could see before is this render test one. It again shows off some material balls and cubes with different values of roughness. Also this big structure over here. Way above it is another platform with the same stone box we saw earlier, labeled Ground Truth Test. It still has the same room inside. Just this one also has a real photo of the material balls and color palette that are in-game next to it. Further up is something for us Just Cause fans. A bunch of chaos objects that are set to break as soon as they load. Interestingly, these are not copied over from Just Cause 3 or 4, these are new designs. So it seems like some kind of destructible infrastructure was planned or at least considered. The last handful of test areas seem to be multiplayer features. The smallest one is multiplayer bug repro, which sounds like whoever worked on this was trying to nail down a specific multiplayer error. We have this one box with 2 lights and smoke effect and 5 cubes with debug labels. Only the last 2 can be moved, and I couldn't tell you what they were trying to test here. The next area is a large one, and has several obstacles, labeled either multiplayer test or test anon. It has several structures, but nothing really notable otherwise. But the last one is the big one, proto multiplayer obstacles. And this place is filled with all kinds of stuff. Let's start here, the windows. We have 2 sets, closed and already opened. You can interact with most of them to open them, presumably this was going to tie into a mechanic to break into a place and rob it. And this ties back to the intricate buildings from before, with the non-see-through windows. Perhaps nicer places couldn't be broken into like this, and you'd have to find a different way. We can also find a timed explosive, wrench and pry bar, and these actually fall when you run into them. Unfortunately, we can't hold them though. Next up are shutter gates, that are locked with either 1 or 2 locks, and keys laying on the floor. Again, we can't pick things up, so we can't unlock them. Next is the checkpoint barrier. Standing in front prompts you to show documents, but interacting tells you you don't have the correct one, and you can't enter. Again, there is a document item on the floor, but it can't be picked up. There is also a boom barrier, which has a closed and open barrier that can actually be used with a button this time. Pressing it closes the open one and opens the closed one. This is again something that was mentioned by the insider report, where enemies would supposedly set up checkpoints in strategic ways. Most interestingly are these security cameras. They move around and you can see their field of view. Running into one shows the text detected, guards are on the way. But we can disable the security system on this control box. Just hold E to disable the generator and they will stop all movement. Stealth interestingly was never explicitly mentioned in any reports, but it would explain comparisons made to Payday and Battlefield Hardline in a second report. Sliding gate does exactly what you'd expect, with the press of another button. And this set of connected buttons makes it so that pressing one unpresses the other one. This electric fence obstacle does actually seem to work. Running into it gives you the text, "Electric fence, zap, that must have hurt." This too can be disabled with a button on the other side. Disabling makes it act like any other fence over here, where the game probably expects you to use the bolt cutter on the floor, but you know the drill by now, no picking up items. The last obstacles are these differently colored doors. Some are locked and have keys next to them, and hence can't be used by us here, but some of them will open just fine. Also interesting how we can find more pry bars and explosives here, indicating those could have been used to open doors also. And that is the entire Contraband test world. It's genuinely interesting how many clues of gameplay this small map alone revealed, and I hope you found it as interesting as I did. And to get back to what I promised earlier, This last room next to the town has this beautiful hero art for the game, showcasing some of the aspects that were planned. In the bottom left, we can see a car chasing a truck and stealing boxes of cargo out of it. Notice how it has a roof-mounted gun, which could hint at a vehicle customization as mentioned before. Behind it are also the temple spires we've already seen several of. There's also a small plane with floats, likely being used to get away after a heist. It having floats would also again tie into the idea that many locations were being on a coastline. The man in the green shirt also looks similar to one of the characters we saw earlier on the floating platform. Besides him is also someone using a bike we drove earlier. The city buildings in the background are unfortunately missing at this point, but it's still cool to see what they planned for. The character in a white suit seems to be framed as the villain. The flowers behind him appear to be opium poppies, which IRL are used to manufacture various substances. And finally, you can see these big red Chinese characters next to the woman's face, which simply stand for greed. You might also wonder what other maps exist in this game. There is map_empty, which just has this lone test platform. And then there's also a multiplayer dev plane, which has this extreme desert, rocks, greens terrain, with lots of water and a spawn under the map. There's honestly nothing more to find here though, unfortunately. 1 year ago now, Avalanche revealed active development on Contraband had stopped while they evaluate the project's future. But just like after the first teaser trailer, we never heard about the game from Avalanche ever again. And interestingly enough, Avalanche has been in a situation like this before. Over 15 years ago, their most ambitious game was an open-world fantasy game called Iron Guard. The company funding the game pulled out, the project got put on hold while they looked for new funding and a way to bring the game back. But that also never happened. All that survived of Iron Guard was a handful of images from a single feature in Edge magazine. Contraband was lucky in comparison, it never had any screenshots revealed, but playable parts of the game escaped. So while what we saw today was likely not what the game was ultimately going to be like, it does show us what once was and could have been and confirmed almost everything insiders told us. So that was Contraband, the game that could have brought back and given us what we expect of Avalanche Studios. Contraband deserved better than this, but at least it finally got to see the light of day.